Good morning from WKYT News. I'm Bill Bryant, and we welcome you to Kentucky Newsmakers and hope you're enjoying your weekend. Later, WKYT investigative reporter Miranda Combs on what she's been looking into lately, including an update on the opioid crisis that continues to grip Kentucky. Miranda will be with us later. But first, Republican State Representative David Meade is here at a time of revelations that have shocked and rocked Frankfort and a point where major issues are up for debate. Last Sunday, House Speaker Jeff Hoover resigned from his powerful position. Later in the week, Representative Brian Linder apologized to his family and to voters and to the state for his actions related to sexual harassment. All of this comes as Kentucky faces major problems. A historic pension crisis threatens to cripple the state. Lawmakers are required to pass a two-year state budget that right now, the current budget is running short. It all comes, as many say, it's going to take money to confront the state's drug issue and other challenges. Joining us this morning is Representative Meade, the Republican caucus chairman, who is from Stanford. And we really do appreciate you coming in.
Thank you for asking me, Bill.
You know, and just as we were sitting down for this taping going into the weekend, we were getting word that now former House Speaker Jeff Hoover has been hospitalized following a heart ailment, being tested. His family has confirmed that and requested privacy. But your thoughts at this time regarding Representative Hoover?
Well, I don't know many of the facts in the matter right now. I know pretty much what you've just said, but all I can say is right now our thoughts and prayers go out to him and his family and hopefully that quick and speedy recovery.
Last 10 days have been a whirlwind for reporters. I know I can only imagine for lawmakers after the revelations of sexual harassment, the resignation of the House Speaker. Is the public's business getting done in that environment?
It is. It absolutely is. The first thing we have to do is, of course, move forward, and we have to do that in a very responsible way, and we have to do that by getting to the bottom of all the facts and make decisions based on those facts. And so we have launched an independent investigation into this, and we will get to the bottom of all those facts. But as you said, we have to continue doing the people's business alongside of that as well. And just because this has popped up, the people's business has not stopped. We still have a pension crisis that is still out there. We still have a state budget that is going to be one of the toughest that anyone can remember in history. So we have to continue doing those things in the people's business, and we are doing those things. We had to push the pause button this week to get things back on track and up and running in the House of Representatives, but we're back going, and we are doing the people's business, and we have to continue to do that. We will not fail at it.
Do voters have a right to be very concerned about the pause button being pushed at a time when these major issues are confronting the state? I
don't think so. The pause button had to be pushed just to simply figure out where we are, how that transition of power occurs from the speaker that resigned to now acting Speaker David Osborne. We've gotten through that, and this week has been a very difficult week, and we've had to be very deliberate in our steps to make sure that we did everything by the book. We started out Monday morning with meeting as House leadership and meeting with the director of the Legislative Research Commission, General Counsel, and Human Resources Director in order to get things back up and going and pushed in the right direction. They have given us information that we've needed on how to transition that power to Speaker Pro Tem Osborne and what authority he had. We hired General Counsel this week to advise us on human resources matters and personnel matters, and so we're continuing to move forward on that.
Do you have any idea where this investigation is going?
We don't. As I've said, we've hired Middleton Rutlinger out of Louisville to handle this investigation, and also to, as I said, to advise us on the personnel and human resources matter. They will come back to us in a few days and advise us on their preliminary investigation, where they stand and where they think we need to go from there, which could be a various array of things that we have to do as we move forward.
Chairman Meade, from where you sit, has there been a culture of harassment?
I have not really seen that. I haven't witnessed any of that, and we're really blindsided by all of this, as we just didn't see this coming and no one expected this. But as far as a culture of that, no, I haven't seen that as I've been there. As
you work to move forward, as you said, it's a matter now of just kind of figuring out the mechanics of government to continue to move. Let me ask you this, though, and I would and have asked this when the Democrats were in the majority, and now the Republicans are in the majority. It's not required, but why not open up those caucus meetings and let the public see the public's business being done?
Well, as the other day when we had a caucus meeting, of course that was a closed caucus meeting to discuss not really any policies or issues in the state, but when you're working together in these situations, you almost become like a family. And sometimes when situations like this happen, you go through a period of disbelief and of various emotions, and even to a point of almost some grieving. And so you have to work through those things and air those things out and those emotions. And I think the other day that was primarily what it was about. It was to just move past this and start the healing process as we go forward.
Is there reason, though, you think, a legitimate reason that caucus meetings should be private, not in public view?
Well, when you go into those meetings, sometimes you discuss things that people need to be open and honest about and be able to talk to you frankly and directly about, and they feel more comfortable in those situations and those settings. And I think that if we're really going to get down to the business and be able to be transparent when we come out of those rooms, we've got to have those open and honest discussions.
Because there was some concern about getting the pension bill together and it being done in a way that was not open to the public, although it is out there now and we know it is roundly being debated. There's considerable pushback from teachers and from other state workers. The governor says it needs to be done, something has to give. Do you think there can be a public pension bill passed before the regular session?
I do, and we've gotten back down to work on that. We started last week on looking at various options into that. I think we've made it pretty clear here recently that we're going to have to make some changes in order for it to pass. And right now we're meeting with those members of the House to see what their concerns are. We're meeting with stakeholders in this process to see what their concerns are, and then we'll make some changes to the bill and try to get it out there so we can get something passed. But as you have mentioned, the governor is correct. Something has to be done. We are in a crisis situation with our pension systems in this state.
How does that manifest itself in Kentucky? How does that impact the state government's ability to operate?
Well, if we don't get something done and make these changes to the pension system so we can see how much money is going to be necessary to fix those systems going forward, we're going to be looking at some drastic budget cuts and possible tax increases in this state, and we need to figure this pension system out so that we can make sure that we have the best state budget possible.
Will that scenario be avoided if there is a pension bill, or there's talk that it will require a lot of an infusion of money, whatever's passed?
There will be additional money. No matter what bill that is passed, we'll have to have additional money. One of the things that we're going to is what we call level dollar funding, where we will take that. It's almost as you could think of as a personal mortgage. You take and you break down that payments of the unfunded liability over a course of 30 years. And when you do that, we know that you're going to have an influx of money to pay that down. So what you're going to see is once you make these changes to those pension systems over time, 15 years down the road or so, that's when you're going to really start seeing your savings, and those savings will carry on forward from there. But we do have to make those changes, and it's going to take that influx of money. And in order to do that, we're probably going to have to look at tax reform on down the line to see where that additional revenue can come from.
And I'm going to get back to that in a moment. But can you support the pension bill as written?
As it is written right now, of course, my wife is a teacher of 16 years, and I understand the concerns as far as the teachers and the state workers are concerned. And I believe there are some valid concerns with that. And as it is written right now, we do need to make some changes. I don't think I could support the bill as it is written, but I think that we can make some changes to get there.
All right. Now to the state budget. We're running $150 million or so short on this particular spending plan. We're heading into a new one. We know that there are problems in retaining social workers and state troopers. The opioid crisis is demanding that we address that in some way with some treatment and so forth. Public universities have been cut repeatedly over the last 10 years. This is a very challenging situation, isn't it?
It is. There's some of our staff that we have working on the budget right now have been there for, one in particular has been there for about 35 years, and he is one of our top budget members. He has told us repeatedly this is probably the most difficult budget he has ever faced in his time there.
So when you talk tax reform, and some say code word, tax increases, but the governor says that we can't go along with present revenue. What is it that is likely to be done to try to enhance what the state brings in?
Well, for this budget, I think it's undeniable that we're going to have to continue making some cuts. And then as we look at the overall tax reform package, we're going to have to look at deductions and exemptions and things like that. And then anywhere that we can find additional revenue coming in. It's going to be a very difficult task, but it's going to have to be a comprehensive reform as we do that.
Every exemption has a protector, right?
That's exactly right.
So, I mean, and tell us as a lawmaker, as you said, how do you hear from them? I mean, all of a sudden, you say, well, we're going to probably take the exemption away for this. Then all of a sudden you hear loud screams?
We hear from them. Let me tell you, there's various ways, of course. For some of us, like myself, my cell phone is out there. I get a lot of personal phone calls from constituents, but also we have the legislative hotline where folks can call in and leave us messages. We also get tons of emails on our legislative accounts, and I can say that the vast majority of us read each and every one of those, and we read each and every one of those messages that come to us and listen to every phone call. So we make those decisions based on what the input of the public.
I won't put words in your mouth, but I'm hearing you say there is no appetite for tax increases. Well,
of course, the tax increases are a burden, in particular on our working middle class. So if anything that we can do to alleviate pressure on them, we want to do that. As I said, though, as we look at this as a full package, we're going to have to do comprehensive reform and look at everything as a whole. As the governor has said, everything's on the table when it comes to tax reform.
Can that be done in the regular session, or require another special?
I think it can be started in the regular session, and the discussion and the debates and the meetings can start taking place. But whether we can get that done or not, with everything that's going to be packed into this session, especially with the state budget, which is going to take up most of the time, it's going to be difficult to get it all completed in the regular session.
Republican House Caucus Chairman David Meade is with us on Kentucky Newsmakers. We'll continue with him in just a moment, and Miranda Combs, our investigative reporter, with us in just a bit on Kentucky Newsmakers. Welcome back. It's great to have you here on WKYT for Kentucky Newsmakers as we are continuing to meet with Republican State Representative David Meade. He is the House Caucus Chairman. He's been telling us that it has been difficult several days, and I can only imagine that when you ran for the legislature or for leadership, you didn't imagine days like this, huh?
You don't ever expect to be in these type of situations, but when they pop up, you just suck it up and go on, really, is about the best thing I can say.
What issues do you see other than the budget, which is the primary thing that has to be done in this legislative session coming up? The Constitution requires it. What other issues do you see lawmakers addressing?
Well, right now we're continuing some work. Myself and Representative Joni Jenkins is chairing a work group that is working on adoption and foster care reform. I think we'll see some of that during this upcoming regular session. We have a work group that is right now working on infrastructure in the state of Kentucky to tell us what we need to do going forward on how to best repair our roads and our bridges and those type of things. You'll see some of that. You'll see.
Do we have the money to do those things? Well, I mean, you can find out. But,
well, of course, the road budget is a separate entity from the general budget as gas tax money and all that. But also running way behind. That is correct. So what you have to do is look at what repairs and safety issues you have to make first and foremost before you do any other type of projects. So we need to do that, and then of course there's probably some ideas out there floating with tort reform. We may see some of that, but again, that budget and some pension changes probably are going to occur in the regular session as well, and that's going to take up most of our time.
What are we going to do as a state to deal with this opiate issue? You know, we lost more than 1,400 Kentuckians last year to overdoses. We have 8,000 children or so have been taken away from their parents, many of those because of drug issues. What kind of strategy does Kentucky need?
Well, of course, we passed the heroin bill last year, and this is really a plague on our state, and I don't think anyone actually has all the right answers right now, and it's just something we're going to have to work through, but it affects every aspect of the state of Kentucky, even as I mentioned, as we've looked into adoption and foster care. I mean, the amount of children that are coming into foster care can be directly related to our drug abuse problem. And so, well, as I said, we don't know all the answers, but we've got to continue to research that and work with law enforcement and work with those policymakers in order to come up with solutions. Jails
are overcrowded. Many say that more long-form treatment is needed, but all of that is expensive. Given the tight budget situation, is Kentucky postured at this point to address the issue effectively?
Well, again, just like you would in your budget at home, we have to prioritize things. We have to look at what is going to be the most essential parts of our government to fund before we make those cuts. And so we're just going to have to get down to business, look at those things, and make the best decisions possible based on the revenue that we have.
Tell us about your own district, Lincoln County, part of Pulaski County. You grew up in Lincoln County. What is going on there, and what are your priorities?
Well, it's certainly an area that I love. It's a beautiful part of the state, and part of my priorities are, right now we have US 27 that runs through that area, and US 27 of course has been expanded in 4-lane most of the way to Somerset, except for through certain parts of Lincoln and Garrett County. And so that is one of our priorities, but again, that takes money as well.
About every 10th car is dragging a boat.
That's right, that's exactly right, headed to Lake Cumberland. And that is a federal highway, so those funds typically have to come from the federal government. So we'll work with Congressman Hal Rogers and try to see what we can do.
What we were talking about, how Stanford has really seen a lot of revitalization. Do you see that continuing?
I do. Of course, it always helps when you have great stakeholders in the area, and Jess Carell, who owns First Southern National Bank, is one of those, and he has done a great job with revitalizing downtown Stanford. And so we look forward to continuing those efforts and making Lincoln County the best it possibly can be.
I take it you intend to run for re-election?
I intend to run for re-election.
Appreciate you coming in.
Thank you so
very
much, Bill.
All right, we've been meeting this morning with David Meade, who is the Republican state representative from Lincoln County, part of Pulaski County, and who is the Republican caucus chair. Now, we'll be back in just a moment. Miranda Combs, our WKYT investigative reporter, always looking into some things in our Commonwealth, and we're back with her in a moment. Welcome back now to WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers, and WKYT's Miranda Combs is always busy heading up investigations for our news team. Kentucky's drug issue has demanded a lot of attention over the last several years. We also have a tough shortage of probation and parole officers in Kentucky, and we have overcrowded jails as well. And Miranda, it's good to see you. You're so busy. We're glad to just be able to be with you here for a minute. I know, that's what we do, right? We have thousands of people convicted of crimes, but still under the supervision of the state. That is, that they're on parole or probation.
47,000 people.
Isn't that amazing? And so they're out there, but you found out there is a major shortage of people to keep track of them.
So there's 47,000 people out on probation and parole, and there are 644 probation and parole officers to watch over them. So if you work it out, that comes to one officer for about 73 inmates. And some areas have up to 80 inmates that they're watching over.
Which has to be horribly stressful.
Sure, and they're so busy. People don't realize all the things that they do. Home visits, office visits, classes now to keep these people from going back to prison. A lot of that's going on now, so it's really changed the way they do things, and they need help.
And I would assume if one of the people they're watching does wrong, then they have more to do, right?
Right,
to deal with it.
To keep up with them, right.
Now, you have a piece. We want to take a look at that, and then we'll have another question about what we do about this.
Talk with our neighbor outside.
Kentucky's Justice and Public Safety Cabinet graduates hundreds of officers a year. Police officers train for 27 weeks. Impressive.
Oh!
Got nice.
You aren't watching their training, though.
Drop the knife.
These men and women are probation and parole officers, training to be the bridge between incarceration and freedom. Now, want to hear something scary? By the end of these officers' first year, odds are about a third of them will quit.
That presents a danger to public safety. That makes it more difficult for the offenders and more difficult for the officers.
How do we fix it?
Pay is one thing that we're definitely fixing.
Let's get two of you guys.
The starting salary for a probation and parole officer is $31,000.
Which is a good 10 grand below police on average.
Whatever he does, you just respond. Okay.
But if you think about it, probation and parole officers only train for a quarter of the time the police do. Their arresting powers are more limited.
Probation, parole.
So maybe $30,000 a year isn't that bad. But there's a saying, walk a mile in someone else's shoes.
Most of the time we don't give them a heads up that we're coming.
We spent 3 days with probation and parole officer Josh King. He's considered an experienced officer at 5 years in.
Just swung by to check up on you, man, real quick. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you.
We went on home visits.
It's just you that lives here, right?
That's it.
You're coming off diversion another couple days or so?
Yeah, 21st, I think.
That's awesome, man.
Others have a ways to go.
There he is.
That's the way I looked last time I was on TV.
Steve spent some time in prison and is now spending the rest of his 23-year sentence out on parole. He and Josh have had their ups and downs.
Oh, that's good when I'm not high. When I'm high is when it goes bad. They don't like me so much.
And you don't like us so much, right?
Definitely don't like y'all so much.
How important is a relationship like that for you?
I think he's the one that says whether I go back to jail or not, you know. So if our relationship's good and I know what he expects of me.
The next day, perfecting what they all hope to never do.
We're going to do 50 rounds.
Fire!
Never know when they might have to.
Holster an empty weapon.
Sounds good.
Same day as qualifying, same Josh,
William Despain.
different look, different character.
Sorry to hear that. I mean, did your grandfather know you were in the program? Was he proud of you for sticking with it?
This time, a counselor during an office visit. Josh is one of 644 probation and parole officers across the state, supervising 47,000 people. That's 73 to 1.
I would be lying if I told you that you can know every single detail about these folks. You just have to do the best you can do.
There are no 2 days that are the same.
When Director of Probation and Parole Jonathan Hall took over last year, he says Josh's Lexington Probation and Parole Office had a 50% turnover rate.
That means half of the officers working there hadn't even been with us for a year.
And that's scary to the community, right?
It is. You know, one of the things I always say is that it takes over a year for somebody to really learn the job of a probation and parole officer because there are so many details and so many different roles they play.
How frustrating is it to have officers leave after less than a year?
Very. Every time you get an officer that leaves, a new officer has to come in and learn everything about 100 different people. That's a daunting task.
What we learned in just 3 days is this job demands a lot. You have to be physically and mentally tough. But the overwhelming demand is more personal.
How old is she?
2 months.
Can't believe you're a granddad, though.
Me neither. It is, though.
A surprise to you, too?
Yeah.
It's a challenge to put a price on passion. All they can go by is reality.
Make that space greater so that you're safer.
And that's an overflowing number of people incarcerated that are coming out soon to meet people like Josh. But will officers like Josh even be there?
I heard that, man. Nothing.
You said you were taken aback by just how complex the jobs are and how much training is required.
Right, they go through a lot less training than an actual police officer would, but still it sets them up to leave and get a job with a local police department because obviously they look very good to local police and federal jobs because they have this baseline training. So they just move on after a year because they can't handle that pay, $31,000 a year. And just to give you an example, while I was working on this story, I happened to see Burnside Police post a job opening, and it was more than a probation and parole officer. And, you know, Burnside, you're talking about a very small area.
Yeah. What are the answers?
Well, they've brought up pay a lot. It just isn't getting through to legislators that this is something that needs to move forward. So hopefully people will hear after these stories have aired that the importance of it, because it's a danger to the society as well when you've got brand new people coming in that don't understand it. The director said there that you need at least a year of training just to be proficient at your job there. So how does that feel to have people showing up at your house that have been there for less than a year and don't really have a good understanding of what's going on?
Well, and the drug issue has just recently, you know, it just doesn't let up, and it has taken a toll on first responders, on children and families, and obviously state and local governments. Is this wave continuing, Miranda?
We are, my photographer and I, you know, still do so much on the drug epidemic, and we aren't seeing it let up. In fact, what's really been sad lately is when we go to EMS departments, they're so burned out.
Yeah.
They're so tired of going to the same overdose case 1, 2, 3 times a day, giving them Narcan, leaving, and then coming back.
The same person.
The same person.
Doctors are trying to step up some in this.
So doctors at UK, there's a pilot program going on. There is a infection called endocarditis that you can get in your heart, and it's caused by dirty needles. Well, it takes 6 weeks in the hospital. It can take open heart surgery to fix this. It's very deadly, but people with the drug addictions are getting it, and they're seeing them at UK every single day. So finally, an internist there at UK said, hey, instead of just letting them sit here in the hospital for 6 weeks and then get back in the same situation they were in before they came in, let's work to get them better while they're in the hospital. So they started on medicated assisted treatments to try to get them in the right direction. But here's the problem with that. They're still going to leave, and there's no rehab that's connected to bridge this and get them the more help they need. Because the other thing we're noticing and hearing more about is the fact that rehab takes a long time. It's not just you go to rehab and you're fixed. The average person goes to rehab 5 to 7 times.
Lots of challenges. Miranda, thank you. Thank you for joining us for WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. Have a good week ahead.